So let's transition. Yeah, let's transition to outside, and why do we keep teasing that we're going to talk about outside? And the reason is that so Mark and I, after we did that first interview, which was back in February, we've been in communication ever since, and we have discovered that we're both fans of Bowie's 1995 album One Outside, which at the time was, I think, moderately successful, but it received a mixed reaction. And I'll tell you, Mark, after Bowie died, and there were retrospective after retrospective, I was somewhat shocked that many of the retrospectives discussed outside in a very negative way. And I was shocked because it's probably one of the David Bowie albums, certainly one of the top 5 albums that I've just listened to more, like over and over and over again. And I think it's a terrific album, and I know you do as well. So before I just ask you to opine on it, I'd like to ask you to explain something that most people won't know what we're talking about. What were the Leon sessions?
Oh yeah, you just hit me with my favorite question of all. Yeah, Leon is something fishy. The sessions, right? That comes from hello, Leon. Would you like something fishy? That comes from a part of the session that was never released. The enemy is fragile. My voice is coming back. This is good. I had no voice up until very recently because I had a cough last week. I talked about this. I can sing a little. That's good. Okay, let me answer your question, John. I'm sorry I do this. Yes, the Leon sessions. Actually, the Leon sessions. It's the Leon suites.
Right.
Were the outside before outside was outside? That's the short answer. What the heck does that mean? I'm talking in riddles. I'm not the Sphinx. But to clear that up a bit for everyone, from my understanding, from the interviews I've read, not only with David Bowie when he was living and giving interviews about it, but from Mike Garson and other people, and from the books and studies and that I've read on this. Bowie and co., including Brian Eno, as we know, who produced Outside. He did not, by the way, and this is a quiz thing from my class, I tell my students, no, he did not produce Low Heroes and Lodger. Tony Visconti produced Low Heroes and Lodger, but he did produce Outside. He was involved in Low Heroes and Lodger. Okay, let's go back. So he goes into the studio with Brian Eno and his band mates, including Reeves Gabrels, Tim Machine, and who was it? Who did I want to say? Anyway, Mike Garson, of course, and these guys, right? They go in. Eno's got his cards, his deck of cards, which he's going to show them, let chance rule the music making today. So, Mike Garson, here's your card. You're going to play piano as if you're being chased by wild savages in the jungle. Reeves, you're going to play your guitar like, you're trying to soothe someone's emotional pain because they just got dumped by their boyfriend or girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera. So he passes out the cards and they jam, basically. I mean, I wasn't there. There's actually an EPK on YouTube where you can see some of these sessions, actually, and what they were doing, just bits of that. So they created these suites. They're called suites. I don't know if officially that's what they were called at the time. When it was sort of leaked, eventually 10 or 20 years later, several years after they were recorded. I think they were leaked in 2015 or so. I'm not sure if I'm right about that. The first time I heard the full thing on not the full thing, but an hour of it. So they created these suites, and from those suites came what became the segs on the Outside album. So I keep referencing them. We have these characters that Bowie created, and one was Nathan Adler, who is a detective who is trying to solve a murder case, murder as art, which is a major theme of the it's a kind of concept album, but it's a very loose, baggy monster. And this is one reason, by the way, I'm going to suggest that it's so misunderstood and still to this day doesn't get the credit it deserves. I think, let me just go, I'm going to talk about the suites again, but I think if the segs and the storyline were nicked from it. And if Bowie had shortened it and tidied it up a bit and just put on, say, let's say we've got, the first track is Hello Space Boy, and then, we go into Heart's Filthy Lesson and we get the motel, and then we get, etc. And kind of just those tracks, or No Control. And we take off the segs and we take off the messy part and we take off maybe the storyline. I think it would have had more commercial potential. But let's talk about commercial potential and Outside. Why weren't the Leon Suites released in the first place? Why were they the Outside before the Outside? Yeah. And why did Outside, the album as we know it, become Outside? Yeah. So what happened then was that they recorded all these messy sessions. Bowie created this cast of characters. I mentioned Nathan Adler. We know, those of us who know the story or know Outside, Ramona A. Stone, which is like a sort of half human, half robot, or like an AI human or humanoid, whatever. Half man, half woman kind of thing too. Also dealing with sexuality and androgyny, right? One of his themes. He's coming back to kind of themes that were themes that he had been sort of like, people know him for what? Outer Space, Hello Space Boy, Do You Like Girls or Boys, in the video that the Pet Shop Boys remix. This is Outside album, but right with the earrings and the stiletto heels and all this kind of stuff, coming back to his kind of themes and saying, hey man, I'm back. This isn't Let's Dance anymore. That's another story about how the 80s move into the 90s. There's too much to talk about. Yeah. And that's why my brain goes all over. But so he creates the characters, Leon Blanc, who is accused of murder, living in a fictitious town in New Jersey, Oxford Town, New Jersey. And I love how he puts Oxford, Britain, Oxford, into New Jersey. That's perfect, right? And Nathan Adler speaks with a New Jersey accent, by the way. So Bowie is hamming up the characters. Now, he brings this messy, baggy monster to his label people at Virgin or whatever. I think it was Virgin at the time, EMI Virgin something. And they're like, we can't release this. We can't even make a single from any of this mess you gave us. What are these, the 20-minute suites?
So let's put a frame around this. The suites they're pieces of music that introduce these characters. They are experimental. They're long.
Improvisations. They're improvisations with cards that Eno's passing, and they're just improvising.
Yeah. And you're talking about them as a baggy mess.
No, I don't think it's a mess, but it's a baggy monster, I think.
Baggy monster. I'm sorry. Baggy monster.
It's messy.
Right, messy.
It's not 5 minute, here's
the point. They've never been released. They exist. You could hear them on YouTube. They're on YouTube, or at least some of them are on YouTube. And, personally, I think they're terrific. And, you and I have talked, offline about how is it that they haven't been released as their own album? Because the other thing, they are the progenitor of One Outside. But once you get away from the narrative, Bowie portraying these different characters, the music is very distinctly different.
Yes.
Yeah. So then,
this is most experimental work. I think it's much more experimental than Black Star, even though that has experimental free jazz aspects to it. It's much more. That's why I said baggy, messy, right? It's not a mess, but messy, right?
Right. And just my personal opinion is, I'm sure there's material that exists that you and I don't know anything about. But of material that exists that's out there that we do know about, this is the closest thing to what would be a new Bowie album that's never been released, right? Yeah. But then Bowie pitches it I'm going to throw it back to you. He pitches it. The studio says we can't release this, and then Outside is born from that. I guess the studio representative, whatever, they said, sorry, David, but this is just not going to fly. We can't release this. What we want you to do is make some sense of this mess. I'm using that. Right. Understood. Yeah. We need singles, man. You're David Bowie. It's like Bowie was trying to make his comeback, right? In a way, he had done Black Tie, White Noise in '93. That was his comeback album after Tin Machine, after the '80s, after kind of trying to get his, what he calls his Phil Collins period image, trying to destroy the foofy blonde hair and the suits. And he does Tin Machine. Everyone kind of hates it. Not everyone, but that also got kind of negative sort of feedback from a lot of fans and critics alike. But he did that for a reason. He kind of knew what he was doing, I think.
Then he comes back with Black Tie White Noise, which is a kind of hip hop mixture pop, and it's kind of pop, but it's kind of a little experimental at places. It's got some break beats and stuff and electronica, and so then he does The Buddha of Suburbia, which totally slips under the radar because it's released as a soundtrack to a BBC documentary, not documentary, excuse me, the Hanif Qureshi.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hanif Qureshi wrote the novel. They're from the same part of Britain, and they were like mates there in suburbia. So Bowie could understand. And they kind of like did this thing. Bowie actually, now I'm talking about Buddha of Suburbia, sorry, but it kind of connects with Outside too, because actually, so much to say here. He meets Eno at the wedding when he marries, and he plays back some of these tracks he's working on, which are kind of ambient and experimental. And Eno's like, oh, wow, let's work together again. That's how the sessions came about in 94 eventually. And then the Outside album going back to, getting back to the point here, Virgin says, we can't do anything with this. So go back into the studio, David, please, with your guys and make songs so we can at least like have, something to promote as a single on the radio or MTV or whatever. It was 1994 or 5, right? So 1994, the Leon sessions or the suites are created. Bowie is apparently disappointed because he wanted to release it this way originally. But then he kind of compromised. So they go back into the studio and they create songs like Hello Space Boy. Story behind that, Reeves Gabrels, if you ever get a chance to interview him, ask him about this, because I've read interviews. He says, I created the riff for that, and Bowie kind of nicked it and like didn't put my name on it. He was a little bit upset about this. It was called, I don't remember, it had some other similar name, and he created the riff, and then Bowie made the lyrics, and it was a collaboration, but Bowie like left his name off or something. It was a whole thing. Anyway, so Hollow Space Boy is born in 95 in the sessions, and I think The Heart's Filthy Lesson, maybe even The Motel, which is actually one of my favorite. Yeah. I'm not sure if I've said this to you before. That's one of my favorite songs on the album. You mentioned, I think, Through These Architects' Eyes on your write-up on your blog. I commented.
Yeah.
Love that song too. That's another great one, right? Talking about architects, and Bowie has all these interests, and they come out in the lyrics and the great stuff. So the Outside album has some really wonderful, strong, good material that was not part of the Leon sessions.
Yeah.
Both have their own, plus. The minus part, I think, and I said this earlier, for many people, even today, can't get over this. We don't understand the storyline. We don't like the segs. The album runs for 77 minutes. It's too long, blah, blah. This is not me speaking. This is the way that many people onto it. And so, again, it's a baggy monster. It's not a very commercial album. It's more commercial than the Leon sessions, which, again, why haven't they been released to this day? Because there's no profit to be made. Apparently, I'm assuming, unless it's some copyright, some messy thing with copyright law or some other reason there could be behind that I don't know about. But it seems to me that, we've gotten reissues of, I keep saying this and joking in a way, but, we get like stuff from his, before he was David Bowie, 1960s catalog, again and again and again and again, repackaged in 20 different ways. We have 100 different audio live performances that are similar to other ones that have been released already. And as you said, the nearest thing to a so-called new album, although it's not, but it's from 1994, would be that has not been heard by the greater majority of people, except for people like you and I who go to YouTube and say, oh, cool, let me hear this. Yeah. And also, it deserves to be remastered properly. Also, it deserves proper liner notes and artwork. Also, according to what Bowie said, and we can't trust Mr. Jones when he's doing the Bowie thing that he tells, telling lies.
Yes.
And that's part of his persona. He said that there was something like, I don't remember what he said, like 12 hours or 15 hours or 24 hours worth of material that wasn't released. Not that all of it could be released, but that they just did tons of sessions. And so with the Leon Suites, I think what's been released on YouTube as the Leon Suites or the whatever they call it, different sites or different versions have different names. Those are, I think, what had been packaged and planned to be released and what the label said no to. I think that's what that is. But there are also apparently additional sessions, improvisations, and all kinds of material that, according to Bowie in those interviews from the time, if you go back and you can maybe find them, some of them were in print magazines I read in 1995 and made my eyes go, whoa, I want to hear this. Even to date, where are they? That they could be, if someone goes through that stuff, and, makes selections and edits it and masters it and packages it, could be potentially a lot of other new material, not just the hour that we have on YouTube and have heard as
Right.
Leon Suite 1, 2, 3. So there's a lot of material out there that just it's right now it's just in the vault somewhere, somebody's vault, and
so
needs to be.
Mark, I'm going to have you back, and we're just going to talk about One Outside. Future session.
Great.
I want to transition a little bit and wrap this particular video up. But you mentioned the Motel, which is one of the songs from One Outside, and I didn't write down in my notes, my interview notes, the Motel. I wrote down Wishful Beginnings, and
the story behind that.
Well, don't tell me the story. We'll save that for when we come back. But the reason I wrote that down is that album in particular. I have listened to some of your own work, and I sense an influence from Bowie, but that album in particular. And I wrote down Wishful Beginnings, but you mentioned the Motel, and I could see that too. And I asked this more as a teaser for the next conversation, which is going to debut on your YouTube page, where we're going to focus more on your work. But can you talk a little bit about how Bowie influenced your work in general? I don't know if you want to touch on One Outside in particular or Bowie more broadly.
Okay, so you asked I'm sorry, I just the song that influenced me from outside?
No. I wrote it down as sort of a trigger for myself. I wrote down Wishful Beginnings.
Yeah, I got that part. I think I spaced one last detail.
Yeah. How does Bowie influence your own work? And you might want to talk about One Outside or some songs from One Outside, or just more broadly, however you want to answer.
Broadly, how does Bowie? Oh my gosh, this is like an hour-long answer in itself. There is no possible way I can okay, let's conclude the conversation in 3 minutes, 3 minutes. This is a huge question for next time, but let me try to make a very short thing. Talk more specifically.
The teaser, give people, let them stay hungry for the next discussion, which we're going to do soon.
Let me say this about Bowie and influence and all that. Firstly, let me say this, and I mentioned this to you. We could even do a talk on this at some point if you wanted to. That I've done several, as you know, not only Bowie tributes like songs, covers, or interpretations. One of them you posted on your page. That's how we connected, which was I Can't Give Everything Away, which I actually recorded several years ago for my I Am Black Star project, which I recorded every single song in my own style. And actually, a somewhat famous sort of Bowie related guy, his name is Momus. Maybe some viewers know him. I haven't spoken to him or been in touch with him at all recent years, but at the time we were in contact, and he listened to my I'm a Black Star album, and he said it sounds like Black Star filtered through the lens of like if it were done during the Outside era or something. So like it was, the Outside, because no, I'm one person making this. I'm not a band. Obviously, I'm not a jazz band. I can't do, I'm not going to do the jazz arrangements with Donnie McCaslin playing sax for me. Now I have this Indonesian flute I can play, but I can't do that. So that's a joke. But so it was kind of electronic. I was mostly doing electronic, and I did Dollar Days acoustically. On that album. Everything else was electronic, and I Can't Give Everything Away, which is kind of ambient with just almost spoken word. Okay, I try to make this short, right? I told you how difficult this is to answer in a short way, but so yeah, Outside, obviously huge influence. Now, Leon sessions were a huge influence as well, because much of my music is improvisational these days. And if you go to my YouTube page, youtube.com/Marc, MarcLowe,
I'll put a link in the.
I posted. Thank you. That'd be great. Last night I posted was in 25-minute improvisation I did here in this room with the same background. I mean, I do improvs at home. I do them in the studio. I do them live with backing tracks because I work on my own rather than with a band. Bowie was always working with a band. That's one major difference. And so when I cover Bowie and I do Bowie tributes, tends to be totally different interpretations. I might do acoustic. All the Madmen, you posted one version I did in the park. was filmed at night. You posted. So I do acoustic Bowie, I do electronic Bowie, I've done a cappella Bowie even, or instrumental Bowie. I've done Right Warzawa, and I did in 2 versions, which I shared with you. One is more a typical sort of arrangement that's similar with synth, and the other is improving with the flute atop the backing tracks. My own music has been influenced, my singing vocal style has been influenced over the years by Bowie, in addition to not talking about covers and tributes, but my own original music.
Right.
I've done original songs dedicated to Bowie, one of which you shared, which was We Miss You, Space Boy. I did an acoustic song the day after he died, literally 2016, January 10th, right, 11th in Japan. I think the 11th or the 12th, I wrote a song called Immortal on the acoustic. And this past year, I did on my classical guitar version that's also on the tribute album, which I released early this year, called We Miss You, Space Boy. By the way, that's on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. If listeners are interested, there's a number of covers, reinterpretations, and the 2 original songs. One is electronic, We Miss You, Space Boy, and the other is acoustic, literally just acoustic and voice. So he's been a huge influence, but not just musically, but sound and vision, right? So, I mean, I do video work. I've used, again, tributes using his images and things and mixing and doing. I mean, the man, and this goes back to the origin of the first question about my course, because who is David Bowie and why do we care? His philosophy, insights into human nature, and I'd love to talk about this sometime too, like his ideas about God or spirituality, Buddhism, Christianity, maybe even existentialism or nihilism, and God is dead, and Nietzsche too. All that stuff's in there. And all of it, I mean, just, and he's been such an influence on so many artists. I'm certainly not unique in this sense at all. Right. I have my own style of making music, but certainly Bowie is in there. He's one of, this will be my last comment, I guess, because I know you need to wrap up, but I have on my wall here, you can't see it because I don't have the camera facing it now. Some of my videos you can when I have the camera this way. The top is Bowie Heroes, the Skita, Masayoshi Skita photo in black and white. I just printed that out from my computer. The second is Jeff Buckley, who's an artist who was popular in the 1990s, played the Telecaster. This you can see, if any guitar aficionados, this is my Ibanez acoustic here. This is my Telecaster, the shape of that. Anyone who plays a Fender guitar will know that's a Telecaster. Jeff Buckley influence. So I'm influenced by Jeff Buckley, his Hallelujah covers of Leonard Cohen, Nina Simone, Wild as the Wind, Bowie did that. Lastly, I'll try to wrap up. Ryuichi Sakamoto, Japanese artist, composer, Bowie, and we were right. If we're going to talk about Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, the soundtrack piece is Sakamoto. It's his most famous piece, actually, to the very last. That's his famous, just like, what, Starman, or I don't know, Let's Dance or something for Bowie. And he's also been influential. He also did a lot of, many people don't know, in addition to soundtracks, Sakamoto, experimental music, improvisational music, sampling of nature sounds, which I do, or sampling of spoken word, and piano and different noises and stuff. So Bowie is one of the big 3, and I would have to say, I think I'm gonna have to say he's the strongest influence in many ways, or has been the longest for the longest time, but equally as important. So yeah, that's like I said. That's an hour answer condensed into, what did I do, 5 minutes or something?
5 minutes. But if you're interested in the longer version of that answer, we're going to do. Yeah, we're going to do a companion discussion. If you're watching this, you might be watching it on Mark's YouTube channel. You might be watching it on majorionbowie.com. It's going to debut on majorionbowie.com. And the companion discussion will debut on Mark's YouTube channel. And then there'll be future discussions. But the next one, the teaser is we're gonna delve more deeply into Mark's work. But Mark, I want to thank you for this discussion, and thank you for the music that you make, and thank you for agreeing to participate in an interview way back in February of 2024. And thanks for staying in touch. So, Marc Lowe, thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
This is John Majori from majorionbowie.com, and come back tomorrow for more content. Thank you.